I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, who is Abir Al Jamal, who is a researcher and social worker with the Muslim Resource Center for Social Support and Integration in London, Ontario. Abir, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Abir Al Jamal, and today I will be presenting on behalf of the team who prepared for this presentation. So this presentation is mainly with report on the finding from a subset of 152 key informants from Ontario and British Columbia out of the 366 interviews done across Canada. So why we chose Ontario and British Columbia? Our criteria was that Ontario and British Columbia are lead in the domestic violence risk assessment tool development in Canada. So the various sectors that responded, the slide would show the various sectors that responded to domestic violence with a vast majority of 85%, and they are divided within violence against women, justice, health, and child protection. They constitute 42% of the total sample of key informant interview. Our focus is mainly on risk factors and risk assessment. And the coding we use the in vivo software, and the data was coded individually and inductively. Our work was from grounded theory, where it provided us the framework to interpret the data and construct a contextual analysis. Second slide, please. The key informant identified several factors that contribute to increased vulnerability and risk of domestic violence and homicide among immigrant and refugee population. These risk factors were cultural factors that included cultural norm, expectation, loss of culture, and normalization of domestic violence. Pre- and post-migration include unresolved trauma from pre-migration, stress associated with the migration journey itself, post-migration stressors such as integration, acculturation, length of stay, social isolation, exclusion, among other, all of which impacted the family. The geographic and social isolation, mainly geographic, were associated with rural areas and the common factor for the majority of immigrant and refugee, the loss of social support network upon resettlement. For family structure and dynamic, traditional patriarchal beliefs, power imbalances between partners, changes within the family structure, strict or changing gender roles were among the themes that key informant highlighted. There was also recognition for changes in socioeconomic status and immigration. Second slide, thank you. We have applied a socio-ecological approach within intersectionality, and we wanted the ecological approach to help us to analyze and interpret the risk factor within a contextual framework, as well as the barriers to service to safety experienced by immigrant and refugee women and survivors. The ecological approach had helped to contextualize the intersectional risk factors within the micro, meso, and macro systems. Further, it highlighted the complexity and the interaction between and among these systems that impact immigrant and refugee women experiences with violence. Each level demonstrated the interconnectedness between diverse intersecting factors that increase the risk, hinder safety, and interplay a barrier for services and support. On the micro level, migration journey, including pre-migration, migration, settlement, integration, among others. Many key informants also link the pre-migration to post-traumatic stress, often generalize this aspect And in this way, there was a misunderstanding among key informants that they fall short from recognizing the unique variation within pre-migration and post-migration, as well as how individual experience trauma and how trauma manifests itself. And we fall short from recognizing the resilience. Isolation, silence, and normalization, patriarchal attitude ascribed gender roles were issues that enhanced risk and hindered services, hindered safety, and interplayed as barrier. However, there was again a confusion of how risk factor interplays in different culture and within those cultures. And the complexity and manifestation of patriarchy in all culture, thus attributing violence to other culture and other immigrant and refugees. On the meso level, community has the potential to be a source for risk of survivors as well as the inaccessibility of services. For the macro system, immigration-related concerns interplayed as risk factors and hindered access to services. Fear and distrust from the system as well created additional barriers, and it was a result from experiences within the pre-migration and experiences with racism, discrimination, and oppressive practices within the post-migration. As a result of working within this approaches, system and intersections of patriarchy, socioeconomic, political, cultural, religious, organizational, ethnic, linguistic, and other factors all interplayed as risk factors on the individual, familial, community, and societal level. Next slide, please. This quote highlights a key informant voice on around the inaccessibility of services that's linked for lack of culturally informed services and diversity among staffing, which is an important gap, and also demonstrated how inaccessibility to services and support increase the risk. Next slide, please. For risk assessments, so the findings has demonstrated that the majority of key informants talked about conducting risk assessment across service provision, and they reported two kinds of tools that they were using. And it's mainly formal tools that's validated and standardized. And the noticeable thing within that, there was extremely very scarce, like two tools that were geared towards immigrant and refugee, which are danger assessment immigrant and the patriarch. However, again, those who said they were using it are very scarce. As for the informal tools was mainly developed by organizations in order to assess risk. And they have shared with us that some of those tools where there was some items geared towards immigrant and refugee. However, we couldn't have clearance how much of those informal tools were geared to immigrant and refugee and how they assess the risk. Many informants as well has shared with us that they use diverse methods by combining different tools together, and to a lesser extent that they didn't use any tool and they dependent on their education to assess risk. For organization and individual factors, I would be very concise, and you can join us for Q&A at the later to have more discussion. So for the organization and individual factors, many key informants spoke about that the selection of the tool, the usage, the frequency, and how they did it was mainly determined by the sector and organization mandate and the existence of protocol guiding the process of conducting risk. However, the vast majority did not speak about any protocol or subsection of these protocols geared towards or included immigrant and refugee. Interviewing interplayed a huge part along with professional judgment in conducting the risk assessment. However, there was a lot of unclarity. What was the motive of choosing professional judgment, for example, structured versus non-structured, or for using the interviewing style also structured or unstructured, or if there was anything that guided to be culturally informed or suitable for immigrant and refugee. Training has been diverse, and it ranged from having some training during education programs and upon employment, in person, online, while others reported that their training was through the orientation or through peer in-house or shadowing someone at the organization, or there was no training at all. So also for the refresher, there was less consistency, and in many instances, there were not refreshers around conducting risk assessment, which is a huge gap within this aspect. And also, we didn't know if to what extent also the training was focused on immigrant and refugee for many key informants. While key informants shared their work with immigrant and refugee population, it was noticed that there was a disconnect between their discussion around conducting the risk assessment, the unique risk factors, and working among immigrant and refugee. This gap highlighted that there is still a gap between theory and practice, and how to be more proactive and tailor our work to be sensitive and inclusive across cultures. Second slide, please. So this slide has also incorporated that the key informant has spoken that within the organization, it was optional. However, due to her knowledge and experience in the domain of domestic violence, she had, and the flexibility in her work, she had always made that conducting risk assessment as a mandatory feature. Second slide, please. Within this slide, key informant has reflected on the interviewing style, where we see it is more fluid and unstructured. However, it was noticed that she had, the key informant had a consideration about the variation and uniqueness when you conduct risk assessment between between clients, as well as there was a checklist to doing safety planning. For the second slide, please. So I will talk in general about this. Like key informants has recognized the importance of conducting risk assessment. However, the majority was using standardized tools or informal tools which are not validated or supported by research, or we didn't know if these informal tools were evaluated. Are they doing? So there is a gap towards and the serious implication towards the effectiveness of those tools, and also highlighted the need that the assessors or the key informants who conduct risk assessment to have the adequate training and ongoing training regarding what the focus of the tool, and the strengths of the tool, what they are assessing, and the limitation and the gaps. Also, there was scarce risk assessment that addresses immigrant and refugee context, as well as how to work with the risk factors that are unique to this population. And we need to also pay attention to how to address these gaps, because we will be ambitious to say we need more risk assessment tools that are suitable across culture, but how we can address these gaps in the best way to to make people safe and have an effective risk assessment after all. We need also to look at a hybrid and holistic approach of risk assessment that we can discuss more, as well as the training as a core and a cornerstone stone in for key informant to use. Thank you.